in the months before the draft, he told me that Chicago's where quarterbacks go to die, and he had a lot of concerns, and so did Caleb for that matter. And they spitballed ways to try to assert a measure of agency over where he would play.
How did Caleb Williams get on your radar? This is just a general book about the quarterback position. So how did you get to the story that you wanted to write about Caleb Williams not wanting to become a part of the Bears?
When I was doing the bulk of the reporting for the book, Caleb was at USC and he was a king. And I wanted to learn about his rise, how he became a quarterback, why he became one, and kind of understand that story. And then in the process of doing it, it became clear that his dad was nervous about the prospect of some of the teams that were going to hold the first overall pick and, would have the rights to him. And Chicago was the leader in that clubhouse. So in the months before the draft, he told me that Chicago's where quarterbacks go to die. And he had a lot of concerns, and so did Caleb for that matter. They spitballed ways to try to assert a measure of agency over where he would play. Ultimately, Caleb, was inspired by the Bears and by Chicago, and was happy to be drafted there. But obviously, that rookie year was a tough year.
How close did it come to becoming a power play, Seth? And when you say things change then, I know you say, or at least in the article that was written about the book today, it says that after he got the visit with the Bears, things change. Why did it change? Why did he feel more comfortable at that time?
Well, so he goes to the combine, meets with the Bears, and, enjoyed it, but didn't really get a great vibe from them. He met with Kevin O'Connell, head coach of the Vikings, in the Bears division, who played quarterback in college, was around Tom Brady in the pros, had been around some of the best offensive minds in the NFL, and, was just, and is one of the up-and-coming great head coaches in this league, and really vibed well with him. And it was enough to kind of let him imagine about, like, man, I need to go to Chicago. And, how was that ever going to happen? I think they both Williamses knew that the odds of the odds of the Bears trading that draft pick to the Vikings were slim to none. And so the question was, what do you do? There were no loopholes. Returning to college didn't seem like a great option because it puts you a year further away from that second contract that all NFL players want. They even looked at joining the United Football League, and if he had played there for a year, would he have been able to come back to the NFL as an unrestricted free agent and pick, his team? And so there's a lot of things going on. At the end of the day, the Bears told Caleb, we're drafting you no matter what. And he met with the Bears at Hallis Hall, and I think that when he came back from that, he was inspired and felt good about joining the Bears, and maybe they had alleviated some of the doubts. Obviously, his rookie season didn't go very well, and all of the fears that Carl Williams had about how the season could go pretty much came true.
Talking to Seth Wickersham, it's Waddle and Silvy on ESPN 1000. There are a lot of quotes in here, and then there's reporting with quotes, too. So, like, when you quote, I need to go to the Vikings, he told his father, is that coming from sources? Is that Carl telling you this? How much of the reporting are direct quotes from Caleb or Carl, and how much is it a quote that was received from a source?
Yeah, I mean, there were things that I witnessed. There were things that I either heard about from either of them or from other people, but everything was fact-checked with Caleb and Carl before the book came out. Or before this, it was back in January and February.
So you've shown them what was going to happen, and they were okay with everything being in the book.
Well, it's what's factual, and to their credit, I think neither of them, ran from things that they knew might be, might get a little bit of a splash for a couple days, I think they realized that, there were concerns, before the draft. And, I had maybe gotten 1% of the discussions.
Seth Wickersham joining us. It's Waddle and Silvy on ESPN 1000. I think a lot of Bears fans, when they hear this, there are some who are like, okay, how much is true? And obviously, I trust you. Your reporting has been spot on through the years. And then other people are saying, well, do you blame them? The Bears have been. A lot of fans understand this. So what they want to know now, what I want to know now, Seth, is how are things now? And are Caleb and Carl happy that he's on the Bears?
Well, I think Caleb's really excited. And, he has what he wanted, which was an innovative offensive mind who's invested in his success. And, everyone's fates are tied. Like Ryan Poles' fate is tied to the fates of Ben Johnson and Caleb Williams, and their fate, or everything is intertwined at this point. When I saw Caleb, I want to say it was early February, there was a great moment when he was drafted. He wheels around the corner, he lets out that roar, right? I mean, it was just such elation, and it was genuine. And obviously the season, didn't go as planned. And I asked him, when he screamed when Ben Johnson was hired, is that, how do you compare that, those two screams? And, he said they were very similar. I think that he's excited. I think he's ready to be coached hard. And, even before Ben Johnson became the Bears coach, I had talked to offensive coaches around the league, who admired and stole from him. And so I think that, what they wanted, which was an innovative offensive mind who believes in Caleb, they were able to get.
Do you believe now, Seth, that this could impact the relationship, whether it's Caleb and Ryan Poles, whether it's Caleb and some of his teammates who were here last year? What do you believe, and how do you believe this will affect the relationship?
I don't think it affects it at all. They know much more about the stuff that happened behind the scenes than I do. I think they all know what things that went on.
So you think other players and understood that at first he was a little reluctant to be a Bear?
Yeah, look at their offense. Look at their coaches. I mean, it didn't even last a season.
Right. Yeah. Believe me, we used to host the Matt Eberflus show, and Waddle and I both wanted him out before the season started. We thought they should have parted company last year. And it brings me to Shane Waldron, as we talked to Seth Wickersham. There was a belief here in Chicago that that Shane is a part of the quarterback collective. The quarterback collective is where Caleb trained through his formative years.
Yeah.
So why would the Bears hire Shane Waldron if Caleb Williams wasn't a fan of his?
I don't know. You have to ask Eberflus that. I mean, I do write about that quarterback collective and Caleb's experience in it, and I do think it was a watershed experience because what they try to do is teach you the Mike Shanahan, Kyle Shanahan offense. I mean, that's what they try to do. And so it's essentially trying to plant the seeds for a pro career when you're, a teenager. And, I think that left a big imprint on him. But, why they hired Coach Waldron and why they fired Coach Waldron in less than a year, those are questions for Matt Eberflus.
And then, there's a quote from Caleb or a quote in here about a story how he would watch film and he wouldn't know how to watch film. And this is a question we had on our day-to-day show as the Bears were spiraling from 4-2 after the Hail Mary loss, and then it just mounted into a double-digit losing streak. Why wasn't this, in your reporting, Seth, if you have an understanding, why wasn't any of this stopped in real time? Why wasn't Caleb taught how to watch film and so on and so forth?
I don't know, but I can tell you this, and this is kind of interesting, and I talked about it with Caleb when we were talking about that specific, reporting. It happens more in the NFL than you think, and it validates Carl Williams' concerns because he wanted his son to go to a team with a good offensive mind, a stable franchise, and, that was ready to win and get the most out of him. as much as we glamorize quarterbacks, as much as we analyze them, luck is such a factor, and where you get drafted is such a factor. And Alex Smith has talked about this. He talked about it with me. He's talked about it on his podcast, how he was drafted number one overall by the 49ers, and nobody watched film with him. Nobody taught him how to watch film. He would sit there in a room at age 20 years old by himself and watch film alone. And that stuff happens. It doesn't happen all the time, but it happens more than you think with a lot of teams that are picking first for a reason and don't have the infrastructure in place to support a quarterback. And it's an epic tragedy that happened with Caleb. And I think that when Alex went to the Chiefs and they draft Patrick Mahomes, Alex took it upon himself personally to teach Patrick how to watch film from the inside out. You start here, you go there next. This is how you see it. This is how all the pieces relate to each other. This is how you want to do it for these situations. And I think that is such a huge, huge factor. And, things like that are a huge factor in why quarterbacks are successful and why they're not. And that's what Carl wanted for his son.
And it's an interesting point because we've always cited Alex Smith and how he started off slow. Harbaugh got there. Was it Harbaugh who taught him that? Did he learn it himself? And do you believe that Ben Johnson will have that impact on Caleb Williams?
Well, I don't know when he learned how to do it exactly, but I think that Alex, but he had 8 offensive coordinators in however many seasons it was to start his career. I can't quite remember, but there was no stability for him. And already with Caleb, you're talking about your third offensive play caller in entering your second year. The good news for him, and I think the Bears, is that the play caller is an innovative and bright mind. And so nothing's guaranteed in the NFL. Nobody knows how this is going to play out, but I think that there's reason for optimism there, and it's well-founded. And I think that it took a year. And I think that to a certain extent, rookie quarterbacks, their rookie year is about survival. The Jaden Daniels type rookie years don't happen that often. But it took a year, but they do have some of the pieces in place, and we'll see how it plays out.
You mentioned Jaden Daniels, Seth, and we're talking to Seth Wickersham. It's Waddle and Silvy on ESPN 1000. It was one of the questions I had driving in for you is, tell us about the timing of when you got a lot of the information, because some could say, hey, is this the camp of Carl and Caleb and others who are making excuses for him being behind where Jaden Daniels is right now and blaming others?
I don't know. I mean, if fans want to think that, that's fine. I don't think that they were personally doing that. I don't think that they're about excuses. I think that they're just right. And that's it. They wanted to go somewhere with a progressive offensive mind and had a lot of organizational stability. And that didn't happen. I mean, is it an excuse? I don't think so. I think it's the reality of the situation. And, they put him on a team and the head coach and the offensive coordinator didn't make it through the season. I mean, that's the proof. I don't think it's an excuse. I think that it's reality.
Yeah. Talking to Seth Wickersham for another couple minutes on ESPN 1000. Are Caleb and Carl on the same page right now?
In terms of what?
Do they does a lot of people say, hey, how much does a dad impact a professional quarterback? Does Caleb have his own thoughts?
Caleb has his own thoughts. He's his own man. And, I think that the Venn diagrams overlap some, similar to how they do how they did for Tom Brady and Tom Brady Sr. I mean, Tom Brady Sr. knows his son. And, he probably has a pretty good idea of, without talking to his son, how his son feels about a given situation. I think Carl is the same way. But this is Caleb making decisions. I mean, he is the one who decided he wanted to be a Chicago Bear and decided that he wanted to try to make it work here. And I think he's really invested in it and working hard.
What do you believe, with all your reporting and just knowing the landscape now of these people that you cover, and I'm wondering if it's in the book, NIL's impact on all of this? Because, before they would go to school, and yes, they'd be heavily recruited, but they were still just students getting the scholarship. Now they are like Caleb is probably the first of the mega millionaire as a quarterback in college where he was making a ton of money. How much impact does NIL have and the power that the athlete now wants?
I don't think it helps. I don't think it does much in the NFL, other than provide some of the guys more of a cushion. I mean, it's one of the reasons that I wanted to write about Caleb is just that he had his own enterprise in college. And, the first multi-millionaire above board, college, first amateur professional quarterback, if you will. And that was one of the things that drew me to wanting to write about him. And it's, stuff that I cover in the book. But I think that obviously it's affected college games quite a bit. I don't think that it has much of an impact once these guys are in the NFL, other than, hopefully they have a little bit more money in the bank account than they would have otherwise.
Yeah. I'm getting a lot of tweets, Seth. I'm sure you understand, and I know I've talked about your record as a reporter, which has been spot on. What do you say, if anything, to someone who tweets me and says, Silvy, why entertain this? We don't even know if this is true or not true. How do you respond to Bears fans who are skeptical?
Well, I mean, I've done this for a long time. I've written about a lot of tough situations, whether it was within the New England Patriots and Seattle Seahawks, how the league handled when President Trump came after the kneelers in 2017. I stand by my reporting. I mean, as I told you, I met with them individually and accuracy checked, stuff in the book, and not just this, but like every detail from, what time he would wake up in the morning as a kid to go work out. And so, I do my best to be as accurate and as fair as possible as I can.